we have since the 80s a lot of non-conformist in the city. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when Berlin was divided, you didn't have to go to the army when you were in your 20s,
Right.
when you lived in Berlin.
Oh, okay.
So the exception was everybody who lived in Berlin doesn't have to go to the service.
Strange.
And it's not easy in these times, but go a bit beyond your bubble, beyond the known in the club scene, and discover. And there is a phenomenon that if you come from outside of the city leaders and decision makers often listen more to the person from outside than from people that are
That's
there
surprising.
and living there. Let's go.
Welcome back to Unsigned Berlin. First of all, thank you to our sponsors at Soundplate Clicks. I'm sat here today with Lutz Leichsenring, previously a speaker for the Berlin Clubcomission for 15 years. You're part of Music Board, which is a funding board for early career musicians in Berlin. A consultant for Vienna Clubcomission and co-founder at VibeLab, which is what we'll be mostly talking about today. First of all, thank you for coming. And just to start off, I wanted to ask what your kind of thoughts are of it from an overview, because right now there's a formative time for the Berlin nightlife. We're still feeling the effects of COVID, kind of maybe behind the scenes. I don't feel it when I go out for a night, but as far as I can tell, clubs and live music venues are still feeling it. There's the construction of the A100 Autobahn ring, which is threatening a lot of big clubs, including Club Ost, About Blank, and Oxy, and the AR is being kind of gutted soon. What's your kind of view of where the nightlife stands here right now, and are you hopeful for the coming sort of 5-10 years?
Oh, a big question. So first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think it's a pivotal time at the moment. We are in a transition time after probably the biggest threat to the culture after 2 years of lockdown and shutdown. We're now in a phase that is framed with a lot of uncertainty, I would say, and that's not really a good environment to thrive. It has to do with everything what comes out of the pandemic, being not being fluid, not having financial resources as a venue because you mostly spent the money in that time. You have rising costs, lack of employees, less tourists than before, and of course we have wars that are bringing a lot of disturbance into the community. So yeah, it's a tough time, but on the other side, there are also some developments that makes me maybe a bit more optimistic. And one of them is that now the summer is coming. We're coming out of the winter time, which is more a tough time usually for venues. And it looks like that it's going to be a great summer.
Yeah. With your work at VibeLab, which, as I understand it, you left your position as speaker for the Berlin Clubcomission to focus more on VibeLab. Is that right?
I think that decision came a bit earlier. I mean, it makes sense after 15 years to hand it over to somebody else. It's not. It's an involuntary position. Something that is a big honor that the venues and the clubs of Berlin elected me for so many years. I think it's very natural that after such a long time, it's also good to pass it over to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this already 5 years ago, but then we had this a lot of challenges, and it was good for the organization, I think, to keep some stability. But now I think it's also a good time to move on.
And now you're working on the VibeLab project. Can you explain a little bit what you provide with VibeLab?
So VibeLab is a company that I started together with the former night mayor from Amsterdam, Mirik Milan. He was in a similar position as I was, speaking for the nighttime culture and communities in his city. And 5 years ago, we basically teamed up because we saw that we can inspire a lot of other cities, but inspiration is one thing, but to really create action and to create change requires more than just inspiration. And VibeLab is a consultancy agency. We're purpose-driven. We're doing research in this field, and we do advocacy. So we also engage with communities, empower them, share knowledge, and facilitate a lot of conversations around this topic.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies available to the public on the site, which is great that they're available to the public and not just to the people involved. I read through one for Malmö, which is one of the fastest growing cities in Sweden and has a population mostly under 35, which seems crazy to me. But a lot of it includes research that VibeLab did in collaboration with Transversal, covering social issues, funding that goes into nightlife things, spaces that could be available. And as I understand it, you've done this for lots of different cities. I wanted to ask, when you're presented with a new city to approach, how do you even start that research?
Usually the research starts with a landscape scan, an overview, what's already been researched, what's already been done. Then we're mapping stakeholders, so we're thinking about who are like influential people, who are the people that are standing for a certain music genre or for a certain community, and also making sure that we're not overlooking any, because there usually are people that are able to take part at those discussions or focus groups. Others are maybe less privileged and are not able to take part. So it's for us also to make this extra step to reach out to those communities in the city. That's the first step, and then depends a bit on what direction the study is going. We do cultural infrastructure mapping. That means we are researching venues, informal places, to understand better what is legal, what is illegal, what are the challenges, what are the framework conditions in the city when it comes to funding, to public transportation, to accessibility to space, all these kind of things. And in some cities we are doing strategies, which then the city is more our direct partner. So we're we're looking into what other cities are doing, benchmarking different policies that are out there, also giving them the tools that you can say you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is already good practice out there, so adapt it and see what's the best for your city. And in some cases we also go into economic studies, but this is also then more centered on value that is being created and not necessarily the biggest turnover or the most employees, because as you probably also know somebody from the music and nightlife scene, we the stuff that is most cutting edge and influential is not necessarily the one that make the most money. Right. And so we are also trying to explain this to decision makers and city leaders.
If you're watching or listening to this ad on Spotify right now, you may not know that you can actually access our episodes completely ad-free and a couple days early every week on Spotify. If you sign up to our subscription on Spotify for only €3 a month, you can not only get our episodes 2 days early and completely ad-free, but you can help support the podcast. This not only helps us continue the project, but it helps us grow the podcast and provide a better platform for independent artists, hopefully help their careers. It helps us continue more of the live sessions like you've recently seen with Sylvina or a little longer ago with Corp. And it helps us provide a better curatorial platform for you where you can hopefully find your new favorite artist and some of the artists that are a little bit more on the up and coming side that maybe you don't know about them, and we can find new music that hopefully you love. So if you go do that, that helps support the platform. Also provides you with ad-free episodes a couple days early. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy. Thank you. When you release music, making sure your fans can find it and listen to it is the #1 priority. SoundPlate Clicks helps you create landing pages and smart links that will bring people through to actually listen. With SoundPlate Clicks, you can create perfect landing pages for your releases, even include a direct to playlist button, email capture, or links to your merch. Turn your link in bio into a sleek, professional pit stop with a super easy to learn interface that takes away from any learning curve. Launch pre-save campaigns in minutes. Not just that, with SoundPlate Clicks, you also gain valuable insights into who's clicking your links, something you cannot do with similar sites, all with a free plan. For those who are serious about taking their music to the next level, the Pro plan is only €20 per month. Upgrading to Pro allows access to premium features, advanced analytics, and extra branding options, and much, much more. To easily set up your first music smart links, go to click.soundplate.com and use the code UNSIGNED for 50% off your first payment when you choose to upgrade. That's SoundPlate Clicks, making your music promotion hassle-free. Also, don't forget to use the code UNSIGNED for 50% off your first payment. How do you work with... You mentioned working with groups that maybe aren't heard as often, or kind of things
underrepresented.
Underrepresented, or going to places that have different issues than other places, where some places have things solved. Like I read in that report that Amsterdam has a initiative that uses temporarily unutilized spaces, like not public spaces, but like for example, we have a lot of spaces in Berlin that aren't really owned particularly by anyone, or nothing's really happening in it, but they in Amsterdam have an initiative that uses those spaces for nightlife things.
Yeah.
How have you found working with different cultures that are either way more open to those ideas, and you go there and you're like, oh wow, this city is really ahead of what we expected, or places where you're like, we don't know how to navigate talking about, for example, queer clubs if you're working in a city in Nigeria where it's illegal. What's your experience been like with that?
Yeah, it is something that we always have to reassess and understand better what is the best way forward. Our kind of the basis of our decision making is always the people that we're doing this for, the community.
Right.
So it is always important to hear their opinion. And in a country where you are more repressed as a community, when it comes to your sexual preferences, or to your even music genres, you know, are sometimes there's some kind of bias of stigma on, and I think that is something that we always want to reflect. What is the best way forward to have the best outcome? And in some cities, in some countries, it takes longer time, and it's a step-by-step approach. And in others, we can be very on point and straightforward. But this, it's we as consultants, we don't know everything, and we also don't think it's the right way to go into a different country or city from outside and tell people what to do. It's a bit more facilitating the communities, bringing best practices and good practices from outside so they can also learn about them, and then developing together with them the right strategy to move forward. So it's a consultancy is a different role. Assessing numbers and stakeholders is something that we always do with local partners. So we are also learning with every project, for sure.
How do you usually gauge that? Is it talking to people, like regular people that are clients of clubs, or is it more cultural leaders or politicians in the area? We
usually go in cities where some kind of a challenge is, some kind of a threat, or a development that is not serving the community. So there is some kind of discussion ongoing, and we are sometimes approached by community leaders, and they're trying to get the city involved. The city leaders and decision makers often listen more to the person from outside than from people that are there and living there. And so it's not always the case, but in many cities it's like that. So it's a bit like a kind of a good cop, bad cop game that you're doing with the local community. How can you approach this in the right way? You know, nighttime communities, nightlife is something that is also something that is goes across different departments. You cannot really think in a silo when it comes to this topic. There's so many things affected, from cultural departments to economic department to city development to health departments. So there's so many different things to talk to. So you have to find the right angle, and usually you go with people and funding. So where is resource and where is a person in government that is very open about this topic, and then you go with this angle to start.
You've also, with VibeLab, been able to provide funding to nighttime entrepreneurs, nightlife entrepreneurs, with the night school initiative. Can you explain a little bit about basically how that runs?
Yeah, first of all, we are not providing that funding. The funding is provided by taxpayers from Europe. It's a European funding. It's a Europe project that we applied for and created this concept. And the night school is something that came out of our daily work. We saw that there are really good examples from in different cities happening, and other cities, other communities want to learn about it, but you don't really have the resources to talk to 10 different other cities and tell them how you did it. You're focused on your own project and you don't have these additional time and resources. So the night school is basically a platform where we invite these good ideas and practices to create a curriculum, to create kind of an education program about it, and also give the opportunity to learn from peer to peer. So it is something that starts with certain ideas that we give a platform and then invite people to learn about it, and then in the second step to exchange each other what is a good way forward to learn from each other, how this can be implemented. Maybe an example, in Berlin we have the Awareness Academy, which is a project of the Clubcomission, and it's the first awareness academy that there is in the world. So a lot of cities are interested in learning about it, but this project is just like, the people that are running are super overwhelmed talking to so many other cities and answering all these questions. So for us it's interesting to showcase this, but also then to give the ability to maybe implement an awareness team in your party. So it's something really hands-on that you can learn how do we actually select the right people for an awareness team, how to fund them, what is their role, what are the different challenges they might have. All these topics can be then being developed and implemented.
Right. And is that awareness mostly around safety and inclusivity, or is there something else?
Yeah, so the Awareness Academy specifically deals with discrimination that happens in the field of clubs and nightlife, and it has different angles. We're talking about door policies, we're talking about the booking strategies, about structural problems within organizations. As you probably know, that is the whole music scene is male dominated. It's not very diverse when it comes to leaderships, and the Awareness Academy is creating awareness within organizations and helps them to change these structural things. And I think this is really helpful because we have a lot of shitstorms and anger in social media, but it's not really leading to something than creating awareness about it. And the Awareness Academy is going this next step of long-term change that is hopefully spreading more and more.
It's clear that needs to come from the top down to some extent, but also needs to come from the bottom up as much as it can. How is there anything you think that artists maybe that are hosting events, people who are on stage with the microphone that kind of everyone has to listen to, could do to contribute to that cause?
Yeah, I think they could more than they actually do. I think, I think a lot of people prefer to stay in their bubble and to do what they love to do, and to reach out to people outside of your bubble and to educate and to go this extra step is something that not enough people are doing, and I think there's opportunity for sure. And especially artists could be much more vocal about certain things, and could be part of also the solution.
Could you give an example, maybe?
Well, we all know that venues are being gentrified, and that we are kind of the victim of our own success. So the more the successful nightlife venue is, the more it is attracting people with money, and people move there, and then at one point real estate wants to have more profits, and the place has to leave, worst case. And it has to do with also being a platform for the art, and artists start grassroots in these venues, and then they eventually take off and be very successful. And I have the feeling that not enough artists are appreciating these small venues that help them to shape their career. And I think there could be much more initiatives of big artists that are playing in stadiums and arenas now to fundraise also for the grassroots.
Right.
And that's something that is also not so easy, because so many people are involved, from agencies and bookers and management and big labels, that's for us coming from this advocacy work, it's not so easy to crack and to find the right angle to get the support.
Yeah. For a lot of those clubs that provide a space for especially grassroots artists, on the DJ side, as I understand it, typically DJs are hired by the clubs and are paid up front for that. But for more live band oriented things, depends. In some clubs they pay them like they do DJs, like in Sisyphus, for example. But if you want to, if you're an artist and you want to perform, often you have to pay the club to cover their costs, which is understandable from a security standpoint. And then often clubs will take a merch cut or something like that. What is the difference from the club's perspective between a DJ and a live act in that sort of sense? Like, why do they treat them differently usually?
I'm not too familiar with how that process is, but my assumption is that when you work with touring artists, for instance, live bands, there are booking agencies involved and touring agencies, and there's sometimes shared things with ticketing. Sometimes the touring agency is renting the whole venue, so there are different models. And you mentioned Sisyphos. That's definitely a venue where live bands are not touring; they're basically having a gig as DJs. So that's pretty easy to manage. So I guess that's the main reason that there are different people involved, and it's not like just the band and the club have a contract. But it's a good question, and maybe I'm also not too familiar with all these details.
Yeah, fair enough. Is your focus mostly when you're working on the business side of it, of just trying to connect the people and trying to kind of get people on the same page, or are you also very focused on individual venues?
So I have to differentiate between the work that I'm doing at the Clubcomission, and I'm still there in the board for a couple of months. The work at the Clubcomission is very hands-on with the venues, and when it comes to You can imagine the club commission is like a toolbox. So if you have an issue as a venue, you have a question, you need support, you need a lawyer, you need PR, you need a certain person in the administration to talk to. The club commission can help you to solve this, and we are not also ruling into the venue's operational system. So we're not doing. I think the clubs know best how to run the club, but we can offer basically. And if there is an issue with, mistreating staff members, and there is some kind of problems, we can provide you access to education, to the Awareness Academy, to have dialogue about it, etc. The work with VibeLab is more on a meta level when it comes to the framework condition of the communities. So we think about what needs to be structurally changed within the cities. So we are not really providing services to individual venues. We are more talking about the community itself, and think about the right policy framework. We talk about the safety at night, and even the topic of safety is something that is very complicated, and you have to be very specific how to approach it, and you have to convince also a lot of people, because for many people, first of all, safety is a very subjective topic. You feel, if you're a queer male, early 20, you feel different than a heterosexual male, mid 50. If you're a black brown woman in your 30s, you're feeling different. So there's always a very subjective feeling, and also then it depends on the time of the day, if it's 7 p.m. or if it's 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. So there's a lot of granularity when it comes to safety. And why is it important to look at this very specifically? Because if we go into this direction of policing, more security, more camera, we're also losing a lot of freedom that makes us to go out in the first place, and we're gonna lose it. So when we're coming with solutions, it's really based on evidence, and we are much more looking into approaches that come from the community to make things safer, to have better communication, to have better illumination maybe at night, to have more resources, more better communication with the public, or with authorities. So that is kind of our approach, and it's a big difference because the city usually reacts on numbers of the police and calls of residents, and then they react by sending the troops or regulating, and that is often the wrong way. So that's kind of the work we're doing, and then we can share our learnings with other cities and say, in this city we did it like this, and maybe we can do it a similar way.
It's very different in Berlin to in Madrid, for example, the way that the security works, and the balance of freedom, where, because I grew up in the UK and moved here, and it was novel to me to have to put stickers on your phone when you go into a club. Are there any systems that you've discovered from doing research in other cities that work in a completely different way, that you were kind of surprised by?
I think the biggest surprise for many people is probably that a lot of it is connected to how we run nightlife. What kind of booking do we do? How do we serve our community? What kind of people work in the bar? Are they part of the community, or are they just service people that don't really related or connected to that community? Because I don't know if you have the similar feeling, but when I'm going out in other parts of the world, in other cities, sometimes I feel like people are not very well educated how to behave, how to get along with each other. They're typing on the phone on dance floor, or pushing you around, or nobody says sorry when something like this happens. And I think in Berlin, people are very well educated when it comes to how to go out, and that gives you a very a very warm and inclusive feeling, and also safety in a way, that you feel you have a common philosophy, how you dance together, how you enjoy yourself. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do ourselves within the community to learn. And it's not a surprise that a lot of clubs outside of Berlin try to copy a bit how Berlin set up the nightlife, because they want to replicate that feeling. And some of them are doing it really well. And putting stickers on the camera is one of the tools that you can use.
Yeah. What do you think it is about Berlin that's developed that sort of feeling of people that are educated about how to go out and not bother other people in some way? Do you think it's just a cultural thing that comes from how Germany runs as a country, or do you think it's something else?
One of the core methodologies that VibeLab developed is to tell city leaders or decision makers how to create cultural vibrancy. And it is based on 3 elements. The first element is you have to have a community that is non-conformist and does things differently than other communities. And you have to value also the community, and not just threaten them or regulate them. So the community first. Second, affordable and accessible space. You have to have space that is accessible for different communities, that is accessible during different parts of the day, that is affordable, gives you the ability to experiment. And space is not only to dance, space is also to rehearse, to perform, to connect. All these things are physical space is important. And the third pillar, or the third dimension, is the framework conditions. So that's the city side. That is the right funding structure, that you fund certain emerging artists, not just the top 5%, or because you think that's good to export, or so, or that you have that you make sure that the bus and the public transportation not stops at midnight, because people that are maybe coming from the outskirts are not able to come to get home. So you would also it's also less accessible than the nightlife for certain people that maybe have less resources and cannot pay a taxi. That you have something like a night mayor or a club commission that translates your needs to city officials. It's about having that communication line ongoing. So these are things. So if you have these 3 elements in place, there's a good chance that you have cultural vibrancy. And Berlin has a lot of these boxes ticked.
Yeah.
We have accessible and affordable space. We had it at least the last 25, 30 years because of the fall of the wall, and they were inner city places that have been taken over by art and culture, and we are still benefiting from that time. Yeah. We have since the 80s, at least, we have a lot of non-conformists in the city. A lot of people. It has also to do, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but when Berlin was divided, you didn't have to go to the army when you were in your 20s, when you lived in Berlin.
Oh, okay.
So the exception was everybody who lived in Berlin doesn't have to go to the service.
Strange.
Yeah. So a lot of misfits, artists, people that didn't want to go to the army, moved to Berlin.
Right.
And stayed there and squatted houses and did other things, arts and culture. And after the fall of the wall, there was this period where a lot of misfits and nonconformists came from other parts of the world because they could live that life in Berlin. So we have this very strong community in Berlin. And we're not a city of bankers or engineers. We're a city of these creative people. And the third pillar, when it comes to the framework conditions, We have a good public transportation. We have now also music board since almost 10 years. That's fun, as emerging artists. We have we don't have a curfew since 1949. So it's also not like that we throw out people out of our bars and clubs at 2 a.m. or like it is in LA, for instance, where there's a strict curfew.
Right.
So these are the elements that are in good place in Berlin, and I think that's part of why we're so successful.
I had a question about Fluctuation, one of the projects with VibeLab, which it's a little bit disconnected, but just very, very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the project and explain what it is?
Fluctuation is also EU-funded project, and we didn't develop the concept. We got approached by a team if you would like to contribute to that project. And the basic idea is to develop arts culture, club culture in connection to water. And we have many cities in Europe have waterways, and they're not really used for arts and culture. And I think there is a lot of opportunity. So we're creating with this project a Europe-wide project where things are happening on the water, like on boats, but also on the land side, connected to the water, connected to the boats. And it's in an early stage, but it's fascinating, and I think it's also an important part of finding new spaces, creating new places, and water is very attractive. It also has some downsides. For instance, the noise level is the waves on the water can be carried. Can go very long, so you have to be very careful to not get too much trouble with neighbors.
Interesting. And we've done just about 35 minutes, I think. I have a couple just disconnected questions that are not maybe not great interviews to have, but things I'm curious about.
Go for it.
Why do you feel personally that night culture is so important to you compared to culture that happens during the day?
For me personally, the night is very magical. I just enjoy how people get kind of real at night, lose their daily stiffness, lose their mask a bit that they have during the day, and it's a place to reflect and to recharge from a day, but also it is a place for transformative realities. It's a place where you come up with new things, and it is because you have the time for it, and you have the right people around you, and you can surround you with people that you like to be around. And during the day, often you're kind of limited to this because it's maybe you're connected to your work or whatever. But I think what the main driver for me was that I was running a venue or running a restaurant and a club before I started at the Clubcomission, and my the thing I missed most was the people that I worked with. That very warm community that you have in that field, and so to be the spokesperson or to be in the Clubcomission is very important, was very honorable for me, because I really want those people to have a good to thrive with what they do. And I saw too many limitations, and I saw too many stigmas that we need to change. And I agree that sometimes it's also good to stay illegal and to stay underground and to do whatever you want to do. But if you want to do things legally, you should also be able to do it if you want to. And that's I think where we can help.
Yeah. Is there anything in the 15 years spokesperson for Berlin Clubcomission that you're particularly proud of being able to have been part of?
I mean, it's such a long time, and there are a lot of things happen. So I think it started with a lot of protests that we did, and before that, people just moved on in many cases, and we were really, really mad when it came to real estate developers. And after a couple of years of protest, we were at East Side Gallery. We protested with David Hasselhoff and Roger Waters and did these crazy things. We had Club der Republik when Bar 25 closed. There were so many closings that we had like one protest after another. But then we also realized that we need to be more constructive, because we create awareness, but we didn't really know what's next, what we can actually offer. So we had this conversation at the Chamber of Commerce, and we started a campaign for the music board, which then was implemented. It was also part of our initiative, and it has now almost 5 million euros funding, per year. So it's great. It's money that was not there before. Then we were protesting against the GEMA, who were really like raising the prices in a way. So that was also a very unifying moment for us.
Raising the prices for clubs.
For clubs, like massively, because they saw that they don't get enough money by selling CDs anymore. So they have to change the business model to venues, and we were questioning how come that our people that play in our clubs don't even get really money from the GEMA. So it was only the top 5% of GEMA artists that got the most money, and there were like mainstream artists that never played in Berlin clubs. So that was a big cultural conflict that we had here. Then we had just recently things like that. We have a day of club culture in Berlin, where we have 500,000 euros that we can give to collectives and to clubs every year in grants. We achieved that Berlin's club culture is recognized as culture in the German Bundestag in the building law. We achieved that the Berlin Senate shifted the club culture from economy to culture in the responsibility within the Senate. Dr. Motte and his initiative made Berlin a UNESCO immaterial heritage site just a couple of months ago. So there are a lot of successes that have happened in the recent years where we were somehow involved or supported that change, for sure.
You mentioned music board. What's your role in relation to that?
The music board, as I said, we did a paper, I think before the election, 2012 or 2013, and we had some demands to the different political parties, and one of the demands was the paper was called Music 2020. And the one demand was that we have not only a media board, a film board in Berlin, but also a music board, because the film industry gets money. Why don't we get funding for the music scene? And that's kind of was the initial point. And when the music board then was established by the Senate, they asked us as a Clubcomission to be part of their board. And we are always, since then, are, part of the board and strategically advising them. It's not so much in the daily business. We're not deciding on who gets funding and who not, but we can kind of strategically being involved when there are like big questions. Then we give our advice as good as possible.
Great. And finally, in your time since moving on from the restaurant club that you were running before, has there been any figure in your career that's sort of a mentorship figure? I saw you were in Chile a long time ago with Dimitri Hegemann, who runs Tresor, and that kind of older generation of people who were making clubs when the wall was falling. Has there been anyone sort of like that for your career?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are inspirational. I mean, Dimitri Also Sasha, who runs Sage and KitKat, is somebody who I really admire, how they, push since so many years the same narrative and the same idea of culture. And but I just came back from from an award show in the UK, and I saw the DJ Paulette presenting her book, which is called Welcome to the Club, and she was talking about how it took so many years as a black woman to be accepted as a DJ, and she mentioned that she mentioned in her speech that she was on stage during COVID with Hacienda, the club in Manchester, at United We Stream. And United We Stream is a project that I started during COVID, which took off all over the world, and that these kind of connections are really pleasing, because I see, I never heard about DJ Paulette before. And then and of course I picked it up during COVID and United Stream, but now then I meet her and I think, like, cool how these paths cross, and how inspirational inspiring that is.
Yeah, and you've really been able to start things but be a part of things that have helped people that you didn't know you could have.
Yeah, exactly. And you find out a bit later about it. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much for coming. Is there anything, where would you like to direct people who are listening? Anything that you would like to promote or anything like that?
What I do like to promote in the city, I really would like to promote that people, and it's not easy in these times, but go a bit beyond your bubble, beyond the known in the club scene, and discover. And this is something so unique in Berlin, and not many people take advantage of it, to go to a club that is a bit more unknown, out in the outskirts, just popped up somewhere. Explore the night a bit more, and don't go to the usual suspects. I think that is something that I would encourage more people to do, because we have about 150 clubs in Berlin, and how many of them have you ever actually been?
Yeah.
And you live in Berlin, so go check them out. So that's I think is a perfect time in the summer now to enjoy.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's listening. If you can leave a review, that helps us a lot for feedback and for algorithm purposes. And yeah, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to our sponsors at SoundClick Clicks.